My children wouldn't do that. My children wouldn't down for a book. Or, no, my children really need screen time. Like, I can't get a break from them. Or, like, my children just don't have the attention span for that. And I sympathize with that, but I don't believe it. I think my children are not this special breed. I think the only difference between the previous child I described and my children now is the effort put into the habit of attentiveness. And that's where this video is really going. I want to talk about how you yourself can nurture and train the habit of attentiveness, which is so Hello everyone, my name is Nevis and I'm a mom to 2 girls and we are homeschoolers. And on this channel, I talk about homeschooling, motherhood, certain lighter topics, certain heavier topics like exploring faith after a lifelong atheism journey, for example. But today I wanted to talk about how you yourself can integrate read aloud of books and especially classics in your family home. Recently, I've put out a video about the benefits that our family has reaped from integrating read alouds in our home and from sitting down and reading classics with our children. But now I wanted to give some more practical tips in order for you to be able to do that and kind of go over how we did it ourselves. I sincerely think that every single family, homeschooling or not, will benefit from read aloud time integrated as part of your daily schedule, particularly from reading classics to your children. So how do I recommend you get started? So the number one thing I recommend you do is either eliminate or reduce drastically the screen time. I honestly don't think there would have been a way to captivate and sustain my children's attention span and interest in these books without drastically reducing the screen time that they were having and their access to screens. So I understand that us parents can rely on screens for a moment of peace and to get something done. And I've been there and I've done that and I still do it. I'm not a saint by any means. And this is not to chastise anyone who does this. But I also know that deep down, the guilt we feel over screen time is justified. There's a reason why we feel bad about it, and it's because while our children are sitting down in front of a screen, hypnotized with like void eyes in front of a frequently bad TV show, that time they're spending there could be spent in so many better ways. And it's taking them away from so many other things they could be doing and partaking in their life. And we know that this screen time will lead them to being groggy, impatient, short-fused, with a short attention span. It's gonna nip at their creativity and their imagination. So I often hear that, oh, my children wouldn't do that. My children wouldn't down for a book. Or, no, my children really need screen time. Like, I can't get a break from them. Or like, my children just don't have the attention span for that. And I sympathize with that, but I don't believe it. I think my children are not this special breed. I think the only difference between the previous child I described and my children now is the effort put into the habit of attentiveness. And that's where this video is really going. I want to talk about how you yourself can nurture and train the habit of attentiveness, which is so crucial to so many things in life. And that starts with being able to sit down and read a story. If you've never read 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child by Anthony Esolen, I highly recommend you do. There's a passage in there in which he says, and I'm entirely paraphrasing because I don't have the book in front of me, that children organizing their play based on TV characters or movie characters is not using their imagination at all. It shows an absolute lack of imagination. Imagination has been dulled. The imagination capacity is not expended at all by doing that. And so this is something that I have noticed in my children before, where their whole play revolved around Paw Patrol characters, Paw Patrol missions, the Lookout, Ryder, etc., etc. So the amount of Paw Patrol they were watching was quite literally killing their imagination, and it was just coming out in the free time that they had after watching the show. So eliminating screen time is quite obvious. There's no gray area there, but reducing screen time looks quite different for different families. So for example, for us, we used to have about a 20-minute episode a day, every day, for quite some time, except on the weekends when we would have a movie night, or we would have cartoons in the morning on Sunday or Saturday. So for some of you, that might sound like a whole lot. For you, some of you would think it's not much, But for us, I think it was a lot because I've noticed how it impacted my children. And so I saw the negative impacts of that screen time on my children, and not just the amount of screen time, but also the frequency of that screen time, where it would be expected. That's what they do. And in turn, I got lazy as a parent, where, okay, I know that every day after dinner, I'm going to be plunking them in front of TV while I clean up, or, you know, while my husband and I have a coffee. I feel like there were better ways for us to be able to get that time. And now it's much easier because they don't need the screen time to be self-sufficient in their play. They can use their imagination and they can get involved in their play, and they don't constantly need us anymore. And it was just always a bad precedent for the end of the day, and I always felt guilty about it. Now like I said, we haven't fully eliminated the screen time yet. We might. It's more intentional. It's more of a family time because we watch a movie together. And I love the tradition of, you know, having a movie night. That's one of my fondest memories from childhood. Screen time becomes a vicious cycle where it's often easier to plunk our kids in front of the screen than having those growing pains and the whining that comes with cutting it out. Because yes, if you or your children are not used to not having screen time, there will be a lot of growing pains, but it's so worth persevering through them. Once you've reduced the screen time, I recommend replacing that screen time with books and other time with outdoors, so they can get some fresh air, they can run around, get the energy out, and just enjoy the outdoors. But yeah, if books, sit down, you can open a book and just read to your kids while they're busy eating or doing something with their hands, like playing with modeling clay or Play-Doh. Is probably a good time to get them captured by a story, and do it consistently until it actually becomes a habit and they know to expect it. And then find other pockets of time throughout the day to read to them. So if they're not used to the habit of reading, you have to start slow. There's no need to push it until they start resenting reading and not wanting anything to do with it. So little by little, the expectation of screen time will be replaced by the expectation of books. Oh, this is now when we read books with mama and dada. And I guarantee you will see a change in your children. Fill your world with books. We have books in our living room, books in their play area, books in their rooms. We have baskets of library books a little bit all around. And on that note, expose them to different kinds of books. So I know there are a lot of Charlotte Mason Puritans out there who think that zero twaddle is the way to go. So I'm not like that. I am of the opinion that a little twaddle is okay, and that not all twaddle's made the same. I think that there's different levels and degrees of how twaddly a book can be. And we've had some horrendous books that we've gotten rid of it because there was no redeeming qualities to the books. But then there are other books that we still read, like the Little Blue Truck series, or Llama Llama, for example, or Strawberry Shortcake. My kids love that. That's not, I don't know if that would fall in the twaddle category. I find it quite twaddly. But again, exposing our children to different stories is so important to us. So that's the stories we prioritize and that we read to them. And then there's also the fairy tales. And like I said in my previous videos, Aesop's Fables and the Bible itself. And then some scientific books about, like right now, the eclipse itself, or how flowers grow, or the seasons, or how does an apple tree bloom and then produce fruit. There's so many different things you can read to your children depending on their interests and depending on what it is that is happening in the world right now. And we read all of those often simultaneously and jump from one to the next. Take your children to the library and let them pick their books, and then you pick some books, and just let them be immersed in the world of reading. We love to read about seasonal happenings and things we can go out and observe in the world later on, or that we can reference in the books as well. So that's where the outdoors and the read aloud habit really come hand in hand as well. You as a parent have to model the love of reading to your children, so have books with you instead of your phone on you. If you're out at the park and you have a pocket of time where you would be looking at your phone, open that book and start reading. You might get interrupted after you read a sentence or two. It might not even be fruitful. It might be hard to concentrate on, but that's okay, because it's better than being on your phone, and it shows your children what a love of books looks like. and then start introducing classics that you think your children might like. And this is where I think you should do some research based on your children's interests. I don't think you should start with what you believe to be the best classic to introduce them to. I think that you should pick something that captivates them. So maybe your active boys wouldn't be interested in reading Heidi or Anne of Green Gables like my girls did, but maybe they would be more into something like The Three Musketeers or The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, for example, where, you know, there's a different sense of adventure as part of it, or even The Hobbit, for example. But yeah, just take the time to research what classics you're going to be introducing your kids to, and then start reading it little by little. And then this is when you could create a really special and sacred time where you come together and you sit down and you read that story. So a lot of families do the afternoon tea time, for example, where they prep some kind of treat, make some tea or another beverage your kids might like, and then they sit around the table and they have like a pocket of time, whatever works for your family, 20, 30 minutes more if it works for you, where you sit down with your children and you read stories around the table. And this is when I would recommend reading your classic. So that time that they call tea time poetry is not something we necessarily do every single day anymore, but in the beginning when we were integrating the read aloud time, that was really crucial to establishing that habit. And as you're reading, I recommend using silly voices, funny voices, accents. Do it as engagingly as you can, because that's how your children will really get into it. So those are some of my tips in terms of how you can bring in more read aloud time with your family, and especially how you can start reading classics to your children. If you think that your children are too young for classics, I think again. Mine are 2 and almost 5, and they're loving them. I think that there's so many benefits that your family will derive from reading together, and especially reading classics together. And I've detailed that in my previous video. If you haven't watched it, I will link it down below so that you can see what that's about. And I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope it gave you a little bit of encouragement in cutting down that screen time and increasing the reading time with your children. It's very simple. Grab a book, start reading to your kids. If there's any other tips that you yourself have or that might have worked for your family, drop them down below in the comments. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. It just encourages me to make these videos. All right, well, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in my next video.